Hi and welcome to Ina Knits. Today I have a tutorial for you where I will explain how I knit my standard ribbed socks with stripes. You can find me online as ina.knits on Instagram and Ina Knits on YouTube. What you need for this project is 2 balls of sport weight sock yarn. I have chosen to use PT5 from Rauma, and I am knitting in colors 504 and 580. You also need a set of needles. I like to knit my socks using magic loop, so I use a long cable needle. My standard sock needle is 80 centimeters long, and for this particular project I use a 3mm needle. You can of course also knit your socks using DPNs or double pointed needles, whichever you prefer. A stitch marker or progress keeper is also handy to mark the beginning of your round, but this is of course optional. This sock is constructed as a top-down sock. You will start with casting on the right amount of stitches for the ribbing. Then you knit the ribbing, which is a 1x1 ribbing pattern. And then you continue with the leg. The leg has a rib pattern on the front, which is a 1x3 ribbing pattern. On the back of the leg there's only stockinette stitches. The heel is a reinforced heel and it is worked back and forth. Then I have the heel turn and a gusset decrease. The toe is created as a double-sided decrease toe, and I always finish off my socks with Kitchener stitches in order to create a neat finishing. It is possible to support my channel over at ko-fi.com/inaknits. Over there you could buy me an imaginary cup of coffee and support my channel in that way. So thank you so much if you choose to do so. Let's get to it. So the first thing you do is to cast on 56 stitches on your main color for the sock. And I've chosen to use the gray as my main color or the background color and the green as a contrast. And I like to cast on using long tail cast on method, but there's lots of different cast ons methods out there. So if you have another one that you prefer, you can easily do another one as well. The important thing is to make sure that the cast on edge is not too tight. It needs to be loose and flexible. I ensure that it's not too tight by not pulling the yarn too tightly as I make my new stitches. Okay, so now I have all 56 stitches on the needle, and I am going to divide them into 2 equal sets, meaning 28 stitches for the front needle and 28 stitches for the back needle. And I'm very careful not to twist the stitches. And now I start the ribbing pattern, which is 1 knit stitch and 1 purl stitch all the way through. This is a little fiddly on the first round, but it will become much easier once you get a little bit further into the pattern. So there we go. I've done one round of the 1x1 rib pattern, and now is a good time to place your progress keeper or stitch marker to mark the beginning of the round. And now continue knitting the rib pattern for a total of 16 rounds. So here is the ribbing, and I'm ready to continue working the rest of the leg. I will start off with knitting one round with the gray yarn before I will change to the contrast color. And now I'm about to create the rib pattern on the front with 3 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch rib pattern. And the way I do it is to knit 1 stitch, then I purl the next stitch, and then I continue knitting the next 3 stitches. Then I do another purl stitch and knit 3 stitches. And I continue this pattern over the front of the leg like this. And then you're left with 2 stitches on the needle, and I will knit both of them. And if you use DPNs for this sock project, you will of course need to make this rib pattern across the first 2 of your needles. So then I turn the work, and on this needle there will be only knit stitches or stockinette stitch. Now I'm about to stripe in the first sequence of contrasting color. In order to make the transition between the main color and the contrasting stripe color as smooth and invisible as possible, I like to do the shift in color after the second purl stitch here. So I knit the first stitch and purl the second one using the existing color, and then I will add my contrast color like this. And since I will continue with the gray after 3 rows of the green stripe, I will just let the yarn hang there. I'm not going to break the yarn. I will bring it with me throughout the green stripe and then add it back for the next gray stripe. And then continue working the rib pattern over the first needle here on the front of the leg, plain stockinette over the next needle for the back of the leg. Now I come to the place where I'm about to switch colors. So I'm just pulling a little bit on the last 2 stitches of the gray from previous round, just to make sure that the knitting is tight enough. Then I continue knitting. Oh yeah, I need to pull another. There you go. And then I continue with the green color across this needle. Still knitting in the rib pattern, 3 by 1, 3 stitches knit and 1 purl stitch. I always make sure that the active working yarn is in front of the thread from the other stripe that I'm not actively working on. So like this. In that way they won't cross over each other while I knit, and you won't see them because they will always be hiding in the back or the on the wrong side of the work. Right, so I have chosen to knit 3 rows of the contrast color for each stripe, and actually there's 4 rows of the main color in each stripe. So they're not even, but I think that's a nice effect. But of course you can choose how long you want your stripes to be. So now I'm getting ready to join in the light gray color again. So I knit the 2 stitches in the gray color, and I'm always making sure that the first stitch of the round is rather tight. That is the way I avoid gaps when I turn the needle, or I turn the work, or ladders as it's called in knitting language. And then I pick up the gray yarn from behind the work, so it's placed over the green. Can you see that? I have the green yarn here, and I pick up the gray from behind, and then I just continue knitting. I'm just checking that these last stitches of gray from the previous section of grays are not too sloppy. If they are, I would try to like tuck them a little bit and pull a little bit with my working yarn just to make sure they're not too sloppy. So they shouldn't be too sloppy and they shouldn't be too tight. I think this is kind of perfect. Then I will just continue knitting in the same manner. I will also make sure that the first stitch here with the gray yarn is not too tight, rather a little bit on the loose side. In that way you will avoid that the place here where you will continuously be changing colors. It won't be too firm or too tight when you have knitted further down. So then I will continue knitting with the gray color, the same rib pattern on the front of the leg and stockinette stitch on the back of the leg for a total of 4 rounds. Okay, great! So I just completed the 4th round with the gray color, and now I'm about to switch back to the green. So again, I make sure that the green yarn stays behind my currently light gray working yarn, like this. And then I knit the first 2 stitches using the light gray color before I switch over to the new stripe color. And I'm just glancing down at the last stitches using the green color and making sure that the stitches are not too sloppy. Tighten a little bit if necessary, and then I pick up the green yarn from behind, and then I start knitting, making sure the first stitch here is not too tight, and then I start on my green stripe. And I continue knitting like this with 3 rows of green and 4 rows of light grey until I'm at the point where I want to put in my heel. And I have chosen to knit 6 grey stripes before I'm ready for the heel. So I will see you down at the point where the heel begins. Now I'm down at the point where I want to start working on my heel. I have knitted 6 green stripes and 2 more rows of the grey color after the 6th stripe. In total I have worked 41 rows since the ribbing. So now with the back side of the leg facing you, this is needle number 2 or 3 and 4 if you're knitting with DP ends. You will now start working the heel across these stitches. There will be 28 stitches if you're using my stitch count for the sock. And I will start with the wrong side of the work. And I always slip the first stitch as if to purl. Then I purl the second stitch. I slip the next stitch as well as if to purl, and I also make sure to have the working yarn in front of the work, like so. Then I purl the next stitch and I slip the next stitch as if to purl with the working yarn in front of the work, and then I continue purling the next stitch. And I repeat these 2 stitches throughout the needle until the end. And if you have an even number of stitches on your needle like I do, the last stitch will always be a knitted or a purled stitch, not a slip stitch, and that's kind of important to make sure that you purl the last one, because that is the stitch that you're going to slip on the next needle when you turn the work. So now I'm at the right side of the heel, and then I'm going to slip the first stitch as if to knit, and then I knit the next stitches on this needle. Like so. These 2 rows will be repeated a total of 12 times, and when I've done so I will come back to you with the heel turn. The heel flap is now completed, and this is the so-called reinforced heel, which allows a little bit more wear before it gets holes than a regular heel. I'm not quite sure what the correct name for this heel turn is, but I have learned this technique from a friend here in Norway. Okay, so we start on the wrong side of the heel flap, and I slip the first stitch, and then I'm going to purl the next stitches until I have 11 stitches left on the needle. And with 11 stitches left, I'm going to purl the next 2 stitches together, like that. Then I turn the work, I slip the first stitch, and then I knit the next stitches until I have 11 stitches left on the needle. Okay, that was one too many. And then I'm going to slip the next 2 stitches knitwise and then knit them together. That is a slip slip knit. Okay, so then I am left with 9 stitches here on my left needle. I have 9 stitches here on the far right, and then I have 8 center stitches, and these will create the heel itself. Then I turn the work and I knit across the next 7 stitches, or I slip the first one, sorry, and then I knit the next 6 stitches. Until I have 1 left of these center stitches, and I purl that one together with the next side stitch. Okay, so then I'm left with 2, 4, 6, 8 stitches on my left needle, and I will turn the work again. I slip the first stitch, and then I knit the next 6 stitches, and then I will slip the last one and the first of the side stitches and knit the 2 together like that. You see a little heel turn there coming along. And then I turn the work again and I repeat the process. Slip the first stitch and purl the next 6 stitches. And then I purl the next 2 stitches together. And now I'm left with 2, 4, 6, 7 stitches here on my left needle, and I will turn the work again. I will repeat this process until I have completed all the stitches on my left needle and all the stitches on my far right on the right needle. And they're all incorporated in the heel turn. So this is the heel flap and the heel turn. And this type of heel sits very nicely on the heel. So it's one of my favorite ways of knitting a heel. So we are now left with 8 stitches, and the next thing we are about to do is pick up stitches on the side here of the heel flap and do the gusset decreases. So because we slipped the first stitches, there are now 12 loops on the side here, so it's very easy to pick up those, and I like to do them as I go. So the first thing I do is to pull my cable in between those 8 stitches, and I find it easier that way to start picking up. And then I just push my needle through the little loophole like that, and then I pick up the working yarn, and that's 1 stitch, and I will repeat that for the next 12 loopholes. And you can see here that it creates a tiny hole, and if you're bothered with the holes, which I'm not, you could pick up the stitches from behind instead to avoid making that hole, but I think it's fine this way. And I also want to pick up a stitch here in the gap between the heel flap and the next needle. So I just pick up this little piece of thread, and I pull the working yarn like that in order to pick up the stitch. I hope you could see that, but I will repeat it on the other side. Okay, and then I'm working the stitches here on the front of the foot, and I work them in the order of the rib pattern. So I knit the stitches that were knit before, and I purl the stitches where they are purled in the pattern. Okay, and now I'm going to pick up this stitch in the gap between the last stitch and the heel cap. There we go. And then I start picking up stitches in these loopholes again. And I trying to do the same number as for the other side, so I will pick up another 13 stitches in these loopholes. There we are. There's a total of 14 stitches here on this side of the heel flap, and then I work it together with the next stitches of the heel turn, like that. Then you should have 18 stitches on this side of the heel and 18 stitches on this side, and you still have the 28 stitches on the front of the sock. And if you're knitting with steepy ends, you're of course free to divide the stitches between the 4 needles as you please. Okay, so now I will knit until I have 3 stitches left on my my left needle. Okay, now I'm ready to do my first gusset decrease, and I like to do it this way. I will knit the next 2 stitches together and then just knit the last one, and I try to tighten a little bit there. And I always tighten my first stitch on the next needle to avoid ladders, and then I continue across the front of the foot in the rib pattern. On the next needle I will do the same gusset decrease. I knit the first stitch on this needle and then I slip the next 2 stitches as if to knit, and then I knit the 2 together, so a slip slip knit, and then I continue in stockinette. When I do this type of gusset decrease, the start of the round is actually here at the bottom of the foot, and you might want to mark this with a stitch marker or a progress keeper, and you will repeat the process of doing the gusset decreases every other row. So for this row I will just knit across all stitches, and now I'm at the place where I need to change my color of the working yarn again, and I will repeat the shift on the 3rd stitch as I did up here when I worked on the leg. So I will continue working the first 2 stitches with the grey color, and then I'm going to just pull a little bit on the last stitches down here with the green color, just to make sure it doesn't appear sloppy. Then I pick up my green working yarn from behind the grey one, and I start knitting the green stripe, making sure that the first stitch is a little bit loose. Okay, so you will continue knitting these 2 rounds with gusset decrease on the right side and the left side of the sock every other row until you have decreased to the same amount of stitches on these 2 needles as you have on the front of the sock. And in my sock that means 28 stitches on the front and 28 stitches here on the back. Now the heel is completed and I have decreased for the gusset on both sides, and I now have 28 stitches left on this side and 28 on the front of the foot. And I'm now going to continue knitting as I did up on the leg. And I'm about to change back to the green stripe here, so I will just briefly show you how I deal with that switch. I knit the 2 first stitches with the grey color, and then I need to pull a little bit on the last 2 stitches down below on the last green stripe to avoid the stitches being too sloppy. Then I pick up the working yarn from behind the grey yarn, and then I continue knitting, making sure the first stitch is a little bit loose, and then I knit across in the rib pattern. And I will continue knitting these stripes for the entire foot, and you can see here on the first sock that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 green stripes before I start working on the toe. Now I have completed knitting all the stripes on the foot. So there is 8 green stripes in total, and I've also knitted another 4 rounds of the grey color in the same rib pattern. The next thing I'm going to do now is to knit 2 rounds of plain stockinette. So now I'm finished with the rib pattern, and I will continue in stockinette for 2 rounds before I start the toe decreases. Now the toe decreases starts. So I'm down at this point and I'm about to do the decreases to shape the toe. With that said, you can of course modify this pattern as you like. If you want the foot to be longer, you can add another set of stripes, or you could continue knitting in stockinette for another centimeter or 2, however long you want the sock to be, before you start decreasing for the toe. Just remember that the toe will add approximately 5 centimeters to the length of the foot. If you want a larger sock in circumference, you can of course cast on more stitches than I have done, or if you want a narrower sock, that's fine too. Just make sure that the total amount of stitches is an even number. Okay, so now I will show you how I decrease the toe. I will do the decreases in both sides, and I will do them every other row. So I start with knitting the first stitch, and then I slip, slip, and I knit the 2 stitches together for my first decrease. Then I knit across until I have 3 stitches left on my needle. Okay, I have 3 stitches left on the needle, and then I will knit 2 together and knit the last stitch. Then I will do the exact same on the other side. I knit the first stitch, I slip, slip, and knit these 2 stitches together. Then I knit across until I have 3 stitches left on my needle. Then I knit 2 stitches together and I knit the last stitch. That is my first set of decreases. Then I knit across all stitches until I have completed the round, and then I will repeat the decrease round. And these 2 rounds of decrease round and then a plain stockinette round is repeated until you have 12 stitches left on this needle and 12 stitches left on the back of the foot. So see you then. There is now 12 stitches left on each of these needles. I would now like to demonstrate how I do a Kitchener stitch. This creates a very neat finishing. A Kitchener stitch can be performed using a tapestry needle, but I really like to do it this way, without tapestry needle. And all you have to do then is to keep the stitches aligned like this on the 2 needles. And if you're using DPNs, you can easily do the same, just with 3 double-pointed needles instead of my long cable needle. The first thing we are to do is to cut the working yarn. I like to cut it so that I have approximately 20 or 30 centimeters left, like this. And then I will pull out the back cable needle, and I will start off with purling the first stitch, and I pull the yarn through that stitch like so. So I drop the stitch that I just purled, and then I pull the yarn through, and then I'm going to knit the next stitch, but I leave the stitch on the needle, and then I need to pull out the other needle and work the back side here, the back stitches. And I will start off with knitting the first stitch, pull the yarn through and drop the stitch. And I tuck the yarn a little bit, and then the next stitch will be purled. And then I have to leave that stitch on the needle, but I still pull the yarn through that stitch. Then I'm going to work the stitches on the front needle again, and I will purl the first stitch, and I will drop the stitch and pull the yarn through. And make sure that the working yarn is a little bit tight. And the next stitch is to be a knit one, and then I will keep that stitch on the needle. Onto the back needle again, and then the first stitch is to be a knit one, and drop the stitch. The next stitch is a purl stitch, and keep the stitch on the needle. So this sequence is repeated throughout until you have 2 stitches left on the front needle. And then I'm going to show you how to deal with the last 2 stitches. Now I'm left with 2 stitches on the front needle and 2 stitches on the back needle, and I will just work them as one stitch. Then I will purl the first stitches together and pull the yarn through, and then I will knit the stitches on the back needle together and pull the yarn through. Like that. Now we have a very neat finishing. It looks like there are infinite stitches from the front until the back of the sock. The sock is now completed, and I really want to recommend Knitting I Love. She's got a brilliant tutorial on how to do the Kitchener stitch without a tapestry needle. So check her out if you are curious to learn more about that technique. I hope you found this tutorial useful and easy to understand. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments down below. If you would like to see more tutorials or YouTube videos about knitting and yarn inspiration, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button on this video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!